Hello, and welcome to another episode of David's Divergent Discussions. I'm your host, David Gray Hammond, and today I'm here with Jaesic Wade of Queer Cult, and it's going to be a really good one. We're talking about neurodivergence and substance use, which anyone who follows my work will know that I have basically spoken about substance use ever since I first entered the autistic community. Um, and I myself am a recovering drug and alcohol addict. I am 7 years sober.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
Congrats.
So we'll start with some brief audio descriptions. I'm David. I am a mid-30s white male presenting Mediterranean man with thick-rimmed greyish purpley glasses, a shaved head that actually needs a bit more shaving, I think. A beard, a lip piercing, an ear tunnel, sat next to the rickety bookcase with Tedworth there, in a very blue room with a map of Middle Earth in the background, because you've got to have that map of Middle Earth.
You gotta.
Jaesic, would you like to do a brief audio description?
Sure. So I am a white, non-binary individual with bleach blonde hair on top and shaved sides. I'm wearing a pinkish, except I think it's faded enough to. It's white. It's a white shirt. It's an off-white shirt. And very plain white walls behind me because even though I moved in months ago, I have not put anything on my walls. um, and yeah, I think that should do it.
Fantastic. So, substance use. Some caveats here talking about substance use. Um, I'm a recovering addict, but that doesn't mean that is bad. There is substance use that can be beneficial. There is substance use that is aggressively neutral. There is substance use that can be life destroying. I think we need to be clear that, we don't place moral judgment on it here, which is what society so often does. Um, you know, that there are different laws in different countries, different opinions in different cultures. But overall, in my opinion, I don't know, I'll ask you your thoughts in a second, Jason, but in my opinion, substance use should very much be a personal choice, like a informed consent, as it were.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And the informed part is the important part, right? I think because there is so much stigma and judgment against drug use in general. And so there's okay, I have two schools of thought here. So there's the stigma and the judgment that comes along with certain drugs. And it doesn't matter like what stage. I would say there's like a general stigma against certain drug classes and certain drug types. And then you have the glorification on the other side of the same things, or only some of them. Alcohol would be definitely one of them, at least in the United States, and I would say in greater part of the world, where, alcohol's probably one of the most dangerous of the drugs that we have access to. And yet it's like you drink it to celebrate, you drink it to be sad, you drink it to it's a social thing, and also it can become something so debilitating and life destroying that it's like it covers the full spectrum basically. And there is stigma against it still, but it's like the socially acceptable drug to use. And here in the United States, of course, weed is picking up steam as far as that's concerned, where it's losing some of its stigma and is gaining some of its glorification. And I certainly could go into many stories about all of that, about like just my journey with alcohol, with weed, with other substances. And I'm sure we will, but it's a matter of like, yeah, it's frustrating. Alcohol pisses me off. I'm not going to lie. Because it is so easily accessible, and the informed consent part I would like to speak on just for a brief moment is like moving into college, right? So I grew up very conservatively. I didn't have much access to anything. I couldn't really experiment before I went off to college. So when I got to college, naturally, I did the whole overcompensating thing, and I was quite the partier. I was probably a functioning alcoholic, honestly, throughout my college career. But that was the socially acceptable way to drink alcohol, to use it, to be social, to cope with the stress of college. Um, and it was really dangerous for me. I made a lot of decisions that I wish I hadn't. And it definitely set me up with a certain relationship with drug use that took me a long time to figure out I needed to move away from. Like right now, I finally know that alcohol is actually really harsh on my body, and I don't drink it very much anymore. I was on a quite a big break for like 8 months, I think, over the last, course of the year. Or maybe more than that. I don't know. But now I've started drinking again, and it's interesting how my relationship has shifted. So I have so much to talk about on this subject. So thank you, David, for having me. But yeah, I keep passing over the informed consent. The informed consent part in this case is I wish I had known, or I wish the culture of glorification hadn't blinded me so much as I went through my college career and past college, to the fact that I deserve care. My body deserves care. And that includes not binge drinking. It includes not even social drinking very often. It's okay to not drink. That kind of thing.
I would certainly say, because alcohol is one that frustrates me as well, because it is socially acceptable. It's even encouraged in a lot of situations.
Oh, it's very
I
encouraged.
have worked in harm reduction. I have been in consultancy positions to do with substance use. And what I have found through doing data analysis as part of that role is that in the UK, at least, or particularly the city I was working in, the most costly drug in terms of the harm it does is alcohol.
Yep.
It does more harm than heroin, than cocaine, than uh, PCP, than it. Alcohol is the most harmful drug, and yet it is. Maybe it's so harmful because it's so freely available, but then again, I would question that because, in my experience, when we prohibit a substance, it doesn't make it. It doesn't help anyone. It actually just pushes it into the black market, and people start cutting it with things, and there's no quality control. There's no guarantee of what strength you're going to get, and it becomes immensely more dangerous. And yet people are still using it. So alcohol really, really annoys me because there's not enough information out there on exactly how harmful alcohol is. In the UK, we have on all the alcohol adverts that play on TV, it in small writing at the bottom, it says something like, always drink responsibly. For more information, visit drinkaware.co.uk. It's like, well, no one's actually going to do that, are they?
Nobody.
The biggest thing, right? Because people are like, people hear my story that, oh, well, you started drinking and smoking cannabis and progressed on to harder drugs. So, there's gateway drugs. I'm like, actually, the gateway was being lied to, because what happened was people told me alcohol was okay and cannabis was bad. I found out alcohol made me feel like crap. And cannabis was actually pretty okay. And then I went, so what else have I been lied to about? And so I started trying more and more things. And the problem is they were actually quite accurate on how harmful the other things were.
Right.
But if they hadn't lied about cannabis, I wouldn't necessarily have gone, I'm going to test this theory and see if I've been lied to about everything.
Right. Yeah.
I think the other problem, of course, is that when we talk about substance use, people think immediately about illegal drugs. But I'll tell you what, for me, at the worst of my addiction years, it was prescription drugs. I could get much stronger drugs than were available on the street, and I got them from a doctor. And because I was, we have the NHS in the UK, I was on benefits, so I didn't have to pay for prescriptions at all. So I got a free supply of very powerful opiates and benzodiazepines.
Wow.
And then everyone went, wow, how did he get addicted to those? Like, you know, so,
I wonder.
you know, it's really annoying the way these moral judgments have set up these fallacies around what is and isn't safe. You know, it would be better if people were just honest with the fact that, you know, there is a moral judgment there, and that may not necessarily reflect the safety of what you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And it frustrates me too, because how does society like actually set us up for success with these things? It doesn't. With prescription, for some reason the patients are the problem, not the doctors prescribing. When it comes to alcohol, for some reason it's the drinker's responsibility, when we don't even have like streamlined taxi service to take care of people who are drunk. Like, if you don't want people to drink and drive, don't allow them to drink and drive. Like, offer services to keep them from doing that don't cost an arm and a leg. If you want people to mind, other substances, like anything that requires a needle, like we need harm reduction or harm prevention clinics. Like, allow people what they are gonna do with support. I just I admire countries that decriminalize drugs, because you're right, people are gonna do them whether they're legal or not. And how are we? It's the same, trigger warning for reproductive health, but it's the same with abortion. Like, just because you make it illegal doesn't mean it's going to stop happening.
Yeah.
So how do we keep people as safe as possible with the choices that they're going to make? I hear you. It's very frustrating, and it's really gross that we have so much at stake, and yet the users are always at fault. We don't talk about the other half of the coin. And I'm not saying that users aren't responsible for their choices, but I do think a lot goes into making those choices. And also, that doesn't mean that we don't deserve care, that we don't deserve health, that, X, Y, and Z. It's just, it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts.
So I think this leads neatly into the next point I wanted to talk about, which is, obviously we're here to talk about neurodivergence and substance use.
Oh boy.
So there is research. There's really only one decent piece of research, in my opinion, and annoyingly, it comes out of the University of Cambridge. Make of that what you will. But the lead author, Elizabeth Weir, the research they did found that autistic people are less likely to report substance use. Okay, I'm not 100% sure whether that's a accurately done study, but we'll see. What they did find, though, that was interesting was that we are more likely to report self-medicating.
Yes.
So we're less likely to, I guess, report just taking drugs for the hell of it. We are more likely to be using those drugs, whether they are legal or illegal, to medicate things we struggle with. And I think this really is something we have to talk about. Autistic and neurodivergent people, we are a traumatized bunch. Like, where there is trauma, there is drug use. Like, and the world keeps traumatizing us and then going, why are they all self-medicating? Could you maybe just stop punching us for 5 minutes and we'll tell you?
Maybe just for 5 minutes, please.
And it certainly makes me think of my own experiences, because for me, like, my drug use really started when I started hearing voices, and I wouldn't have started hearing voices if I hadn't been horribly traumatized for my entire life.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess I wonder what your thoughts are around this, because to me it seems that actually, rather than focusing on drug use, and this applies to not just neurodivergent people but everyone, rather than going we need to stop people taking drugs, I think perhaps we need to be going we need to stop traumatizing people.
Yeah. Oh boy. 100%. 100%. I agree. And it's how do I where do I start my thought? Hang on. Let me organize. I well, we know that saying that goes around in the community. There is not one untraumatized autistic person. And I do think uh I mean, I genuinely think that it's not just autistic people who are traumatized. I think we might be traumatized at a greater frequency and intensity because of how we don't fit into the neurotypical world. But I will say the world at large is just traumatizing because we don't live in a world that is founded and conducted on compassion. Like we don't have our society structured that way, because we were born of colonialism and imperialism, and now we have capitalism and all the isms just like running rampant. So um, I will say I agree. I think it always, every time I think about this subject, I think of that rat study where there was the cage with the cocaine water and one other rat or something, and then there was the cage with the community, and it had like toys and things to do and other rats to play with, and food and regular water and the cocaine water. And guess which cage had the most drug use,
Yeah,
right? So I always think about that study when it comes to these things. And if we really want to fix substance use, or make it less impactful on day-to-day life, then we need to be addressing the problems that people suffer from day to day, that they're coping from, that they're medicating from. And I know some of that can't always be fixed, especially with autistic, or neurodivergent folk. Like I know in my life, my self medication has come from a lot of anxiety, like social anxiety, um, or like party culture, like needing to fit in and wanting to fit in and have friends, but I can't handle the loud noises and the lights at the club kind of situation. So I'll drink to numb myself so I can be present in those spaces. And or I mean, I used to do this. I don't really do it anymore, but that's the culture that we encourage, right? So not only do we have traumatized people because our systems are inadequate to support us compassionately and equitably, but we also have the accompanying culture of, well, if you're not partying, who are you? Like, and these things work in tandem to really create a volatile environment, especially for neurodivergent folk. And I will say autistic specifically folk. Um, who are just trying to get by. We're just trying to live our lives. We're just trying to have connection because we are social creatures. And I know that doesn't speak to all autistic experience, but myself and many, if not all of my friends, who are autistic and other forms of neurodivergent, like we seek connection, we seek relationship. And if our society doesn't have space for that in the ways that are authentic to us, then we're going to try to fit the mold. And fitting the mold sometimes requires self-medication. I will say also like recreational weed smoking, right? Like I have been chronically ill my whole life. And for a long time, starting in college until about a year ago now, I was self-medicating with marijuana, with cannabis. And um, it started having an adverse effect on me, I think because of the combination of trauma and also doctors not understanding that I'm autistic and prescribing me the wrong kinds of psychological medication, like psychiatric meds, for my mental health or for my chronic pain and mental health combined. And it really messed with my brain chemistry. And so instead of weed doing what it normally would do, which was help offer relief, it started interacting with my brain in a way that caused psychosis. And I was having some terribly scary episodes. Even after I quit, it's been a long time. Like this past year has been has been a lot. I'm doing better now, but I had to stop smoking weed. And that was a huge shift in my life because I've just been without anything to medicate with, essentially, because pharmaceuticals have not been successful in my life. So it's just been a whole chaotic thing where now not only do I have to process my trauma and live with it and be socially ready to dive in without any help, but I'm still faced with this culture of like, well, if you're not doing it this way, then who are you? And that's also kind of disheartening. So yeah, I think, uh, oh shoot, now my brain did a derp. Hang on, it'll come back. Talking about what led us here?
We were talking a lot about self-medicating and how
Self-medicating, right?
and how you don't really have anything to medicate with.
Right. Right. So it's been a really weird adjustment, a long adjustment. And it's helped me see, it's helped me see like the need for spaces that encourage socialization safely without alcohol or weed or drugs involved in general. Um, and so like I have a dream to one day open an establishment where like it's going to be a neuroqueer space where it's not centered around alcohol or weed. It is centered around, community care and connection, where there are activities even into the late night, because that's part of the problem. If you want to go socialize in our day-to-day society, then you need to go to a bar, and that's typically not conducive to neurodivergent conversation and connection. Like I said, I've over the years learned to numb myself to participate in those spaces. So I'm seeing this great need for having safer places for folk like us who want a connection and seek relationship, but don't have the means or capacity to do so in a loud, chaotic, alcohol or other drug driven space, right? So these are things that I've been thinking about, and I'm grateful my relationship with self-medicating has shifted over the years, even though it's been hard. But I'm still adjusting. Like it's only been less than a year now of figuring out, oh, I can't use these things anymore. I have to rely on other coping mechanisms like playing piano every day, or really depending on a routine, or reaching out for a friend, or like a lot of things that just are wonderful, but I'm not used to relying on in a way that I would rely on cannabis or alcohol. It's been quite the adjustment.
I'm really glad you brought up socializing, because something I've been talking about in my writing work is the concept of being social, so autistically social. Um, there it is at the bottom of the screen, because I didn't want to have to explain how I spell that. Um, and yeah, so for people who aren't watching the video, it's AU social, all one word. But yeah, I think we really need to talk about the fact that, a lot of our substance use as autistic and neurodivergent people comes from being constantly thrust into these social spaces and situations that are not designed for us. And
Right.
we're going to end up self medicating. And, it's, it becomes necessary. If we want to have social connections, we have to numb the experience somehow. We have to assimilate into it. And it's not a good fit for us. It's like cramming a square peg into a microscopic circle hole. Um, and, we shave most of it off the sides just to fit in there. Um, And it's really no surprise that so many of us use drugs and alcohol as social lubricants,
Yep.
because if you consider that we have a or sociality, AU sociality, so autistic people, we have this very unique way of socializing with each other. We do body doubling, and we use a lot of online platforms. Perhaps, our in-person spaces tend to be very sensory friendly. The rest of the world is horrific compared to that. And yeah, like, that was one of the things that was difficult for me at first. When I first got sober, now bear in mind, people don't have to be abstinent to be in recovery. For me, abstinence works, but that's only because I am completely incapable of moderating myself. If I have one, I'll have 100, and if I have 100, I'm going to steal a Ferrari and try and cross the English Channel in it. You know, um, so I think there needs to be more focus on creating social spaces that are suitable for the various different groups of people we have. We've got literally millions around the world, if not billions, of nightclubs. Like, they're only appealing to a very small group of people.
Right.
Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't even. Not every neurotypical I know enjoys nightclubs, and yet they still go there. Like,
Yep.
why don't we have more selection in our social spaces for when we want to go out and do something in person? Like, it's great having this online stuff, but we don't have the options offline. And perhaps the reason so many autistic people are online constantly is because this is the only place we can be safe. But I wanted to add a note on self-medicating, right? Because you brought up the Rat Park experiment, and obviously it made some important points about what we've just talked about, socializing and social fulfillment and how that can help. But it's not nearly the whole picture, and that's where people often go wrong, because humans are immeasurably more complex than rats.
Right.
And I think about myself, and like right now, I'm sat here with a can of energy drink, and before we went on, I was puffing away on this vape. Like, and the reason I do that, it's not just because I like it, it's I can't access ADHD medication currently, but I am ADHD. So, in order to fit in with a neuronormative world that wants me to act as if I am not ADHD, I consume caffeine and nicotine until it's like 50% of what's in my body.
Yeah.
Like, and that still isn't quite enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I relate.
that is self-medicating, but no
Yep.
one looks at it and goes, "Oh, he's got a problem," because it's
Oh my
energy
God.
drinks and
Yeah.
vape. Like,
Yep.
if I was doing the same thing with heroin, everyone would be losing their minds. But because it's caffeine, everyone's like, "Oh no, that's fine. We can tax that."
Yep. I honestly, David, I'm so glad you brought up caffeine and nicotine, but caffeine in particular, because I might want to even amend my statement earlier. Like, alcohol is a huge problem. I think caffeine's worse because we've so normalized it and depend on it for our day-to-day neurotypical operation
Yeah,
that, like, I remember going to New York City last September for the first time as an adult. I shit you not, there was a coffee store and I felt like I was in a truly dystopian, like simulation almost, and that also has to do with some other drug stuff we can talk about in a minute, but
yeah,
just every corner there was just coffee, and these places weren't even called cute cafe names. Many of them were just like coffee, like just
yeah,
come get your drug so you can survive this hellscape. Like,
yeah,
it's absurd. Like, I relate too with the ADHD stuff because I was diagnosed ADHD when I was 23, of course, after it was useful for college. And I have to drink caffeine very frequently throughout the week. I've noticed that I can't do it more than 4 days at a time, or it will start to backfire on me. So I have to like take the drug and then take a break from the drug and then take the drug. And that works enough to get me by, but it still sucks. And I have to do it because I don't actually have, oh, thank you for the definition. Yeah. I don't actually have the capability to take ADHD medication from what I've tried so far. I've tried Strattera, Adderall, and now Vyvanse, and all of those have had horrible side effects on my system. I am very, very, very sensitive. I'm one of those very sensitive autistic beings. And my body doesn't handle stimulants the way that one would hope to be able to use those medications successfully. So it's so frustrating that I still have to have something. I rely on caffeine, but it doesn't always cut it. And I'm bumbling around just trying to make life happen.
But again, I want to go back to that absurdity, right? Because it is completely socially acceptable for the first thing you do in the day to be like a cup of coffee.
Yep.
I even know people who start their day with an energy drink, and people are like, oh, it's maybe not that healthy, but whatever.
Yep.
However, if I was to like wake up in the morning and just like go crack open a bottle of whiskey, everyone would be like having an intervention, going like, David, you've got a problem. But caffeine, like it's everywhere, but no one questions it at all because like it's actually quite difficult to have too much caffeine, like at least in a medical sense.
Sure.
It's not like you drink too much alcohol, you become everyone else's problem. You drink too much caffeine, it's really on you, and it's only you who has to deal with being able to hear the electricity in the walls for the next 6 hours. But it's utterly ridiculous. I look around and people are like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna go get that. I'm not a heroin addict." I've genuinely had that conversation with someone before, and I'm like, what? How do I explain this to people who don't see the absurdity? And like, Bobby Ellman has weighed in and said, "Yeah, vaping, need my nicotine. Better I'm not smoking." True. Caffeine because of POTS. So I think that's is it post-orthostatic tachycardia syndrome? I think something like that. And it makes Bobby's life livable.
Yeah.
And there are so many things we do on a daily basis where we consume substances, and yet there is a very small group of substances that we have arbitrarily gone, these are the bad ones.
Right.
Like any of them can be the bad ones if you don't.
Oh my God.
If you're not responsible with them.
Yes, David. And I think that in particular is a really important point to make. Like you were saying earlier, you don't do moderation, so you are abstinent. That works for you for these like drugs or for alcohol at least. And I think you mentioned cannabis. I can't remember.
Yeah. So for me, the illegal drugs as a whole, I just don't go near. Alcohol can't.
Yes. Okay.
Can't go near much opioids and benzodiazepines.
Okay, got it. So like, and that is your profile, right?
Yeah.
Of things that you don't touch because you individually know that those are bad for you. I think we do ourselves a great disservice to paint with a broad brush when it comes to these substances because, not everybody has the same relationship with them. Mine, I can't go near like SSRI, like there are certain psychiatric meds classes that I can't do. I can't do opioids either because they make me sick. I can't do alcohol in great excess anymore. I certainly can't do cannabis hardly at all anymore. I used to experiment with psychedelics. I haven't touched psychedelics in 3 years now. Because of a really scary bad trip that LSD caused me. Like there are things that I know for myself, and of course, like doctors are going to be like, well, you shouldn't be doing those things anyway. But I used to use certain psychedelics for a reset button. Like I used to use it therapeutically. It helped me cope. It helped me revive myself. Why don't we allow people their own relationship with these things?
Yeah.
With education and support instead of demonizing any use at all, or rather glorifying it on the other end of the spectrum, right? Like that really bothers me, and I appreciate you speaking to the individualized experience, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't do that enough in anything in society. We keep painting with broad strokes and people get hurt for it. I am
Yeah.
certainly one of those, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up psychedelics, because if you just said that 20 years ago that it was therapeutic for you, people have been like, no, that's not true. They're dangerous. But actually, you know, as a bit of a middle finger to everyone who ever said that, there is now entire fields of study dedicated to the fact that a lot of psychedelic drugs have very important
Yep.
therapeutic benefits. You know, MDMA's just been through its final phase trial, I believe, as a treatment for PTSD.
Oh, wow.
And LSD and psilocybin
Yes.
are tests, you know, for depression. And
Yep. And ketamine. I was
ketamine
just going
has
to bring up ketamine.
already been prescribed for
Yep.
treatment-resistant depression. So, you know, a lot of these medications do have, and that's what they are. They are medications.
Yep.
But for some reason, depending on who you ask, depends on whether they're called drugs or medications.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know.
And it really so one of the things that really frustrated me was that, like, when I was getting sober, I had psychiatrists who were like, you need to stop taking drugs, only take these drugs. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And for a long time, don't get me wrong, I'm at peace with the fact I need medication now. I'm schizophrenic, it helps me. I see it the same way in ADHD and might see their Ritalin. That psychotic headspace, they've got to the point where they made me come into a clinic once a month for an injection of antipsychotics because they didn't trust me to actually take the tablets. But I might have been more willing to have trusted, hadn't it been so inconsistent, where they were like, you're taking the bad drugs, we're prescribing the good drugs. And then there was my head, which, you know, I was running around telling everyone we lived in a computer simulation. You know, like, they expected me to just, you know, be like, cool. So yeah, no, but I don't understand. Like, maybe it's being neurodivergent and I need things to make sense. Like, but the way it's like, yeah, you know, don't take these drugs, only take these very powerful, potentially life-altering medications that we prescribe.
Yeah. Yep.
Which we won't believe you if you tell us you're having a side effect that's not listed on the information leaflet in the packet.
Oh my God, David, I could go on a rant for 2 days about that.
Yeah, but whilst we're on the topic, neurodivergent people, and this applies to all substances, not just prescription substances,
Yeah.
we have atypical reaction.
Yes, we
I
do.
know so many neurodivergent people who do not have the reaction to stimulants, for example. Like, you got ADHD people, they take a stimulant, whether it's prescribed or they've sourced it illegally. For loads of us, it actually makes us feel almost kind of sleepy if we have too much. And everyone's like, well, then how does that happen? It's a stimulant. No, I'm ADHD. It does like the opposite on me.
Right.
I know autistic people who can't take an anti-inflammatory called naproxen, which is not supposed to be mind-altering at all.
Right.
And yet I know autistic people who become ridiculously drowsy when they take it.
Yeah.
You know, we have these atypical responses.
Yes.
And I just want to highlight this comment. So Chris Papadopoulos says, all this is cultural. I have a Greek Cypriot background, and the way that alcohol is perceived is very different to the way it's perceived in the West.
Yes.
I agree with that.
Absolutely.
You know, living in the UK, I'm very aware, going back to the alcohol thing, our relationship with alcohol in this country is horrific. We have a huge binge drinking culture. And I watch like American TV programs where they're like, oh, I've had so much to drink. I've had like 8 drinks. I'm 3 drinks for me at university. Like, and that wasn't because I'm an alcoholic. Like, that was standard. Before you went out, you had like 5 to 10 drinks.
Yeah.
And then you would have like another 20 or so whilst you were at the club. Like people just drink and drink and drink in the UK. And I think, you know, it's really highlighted when you see like documentaries and news articles about British people on holiday in other countries making an absolute nuisance of themselves. Because in this country, it is completely normal to go on a night out and become so paralytically drunk you require medical treatment.
Yeah.
And I don't understand where
Yeah.
that became normal or legal for that matter. If we're making things illegal, why is that the thing that's legal?
Right. No, that's very true. And I do want to be mindful also, like, culturally speaking. I mean, alcohol is used for many purposes. It can be ritualistic, it can be part of ceremony, it can be like very specific uses that aren't just social drinking. And we definitely don't want to erase that.
Yeah.
And the like, I know in certain parts of Europe and other areas, like it's more, well, I think I know the history. It's more socially dependent on also because water might not be as safe to drink.
Yeah.
Um, and like that certainly factors into the cultural aspect. So definitely, like, I think the way that I'm talking about alcohol at least is obviously from a very Western, perspective, because I live in the United States and we don't have, well, we do have water issues, but we like to pretend we don't. But we don't have like a long-standing ancient or less than ancient history with alcohol in the way that other parts of the world do. So our culture is very much defined by capitalism and the way that alcohol has fed into a certain systemic way of life, I guess. So, and I'm looking also at Bobby's comments about like everyone metabolizes medication differently. That is so true. I don't know why we don't have everyone take that drug test that doctors can ascribe or prescribe you, where it's like at least, so they only have it right now for a few like psychiatric medications, I think. But I want more research so we can find a way to identify more drugs that work with our systems and more that don't. Where like you take a blood test essentially and it tells you how certain medications are going to respond to your like specific profile, your specific DNA. Because I can't tell you how many trial and errors I've been through over my life that have really fucked me up. Like I have been hospitalized more times than I would like to say because of psychiatric
Yeah.
medications, not because I
Yeah.
did something stupid out socially. It's because people prescribe me something, usually at too high of a dose, or that I shouldn't have been on at all. And I got ruined for it. I've been on recovery over and over and over again from things that I was medically prescribed. Like that's
I'm a
absurd.
I'm a big sort of advocate of the saying "start low, go slow,"
Thank you.
because and this applies to any kind of substance, prescribed, self-medicating,
Yes.
recreational, like especially if you're neurodivergent, if it's something you've not had before, you will respond the way that most people do. So always
Yep.
start at the lowest possible dose and increase it as slowly as possible. And I've been through this as well because I'm schizophrenic as well as autistic and ADHD, and I've tried almost every antipsychotic you can to get to the one that I'm on. Because in the UK they don't to tell you how you might respond to certain psychiatric meds,
Oh my
or at
gosh.
least they don't do them on the NHS that I'm aware of. They might do them if you go privately. I'm not sure, but I've had to go through reactions to medication, like dangerous cardiac arrhythmias, um, teetering on something called neuroleptic malignant syndrome, which apparently can kill you.
Oh my
Um,
God.
like I've had horrible reactions in my journey to find a medication that is safe and effective for me.
Yeah.
But actually, it wouldn't have been such a difficult process if psychiatrists had done that start low, go slow. It's because they use the same sort of prescriptive dosing everyone else. So they go, well, we'll start at this dose because that's what we start everyone on. It's like, no, don't do that. Do not do
Who
that.
who
Like,
even sets the standard for that? Like who?
yeah, like I think part of the problem is that when it comes to prescription drugs, medication, whatever you want to call them, um, the research that's done very much looks at everyone, but because it looks at everyone, what it really looks at is not autistic, non-neurodivergent people. Because when you take a sample of everyone, we're only going to be a small portion of that sample.
Right.
So you get a really good picture of what it looks like in the general population, but maybe not quite as good a picture as what it looks like for neurodivergent populations. So we have these sort of standards that are built on almost like biased data. And I very much believe that we need research that looks at specific groups of people. How do autistic
Yes.
people respond to this? How do ADHD people respond to this? You know, even for me, how to respond to this, because there are so many misconceptions around being schizophrenic. People go, oh, you just take stimulants. Well, actually, we know that if it's stable on antipsychotics, stimulants are an option if you're also ADHD. They have to be monitored
Okay.
closely. But you need research to account for the fact that like neurodiversity is a thing. Like it's not like some fanciful idea that we thought up one day and went, well, that's kind of cute. Like, no, not everyone has the same brain. Like, if we
Right.
did, the human race would die. Like,
Right.
like and
Yeah,
I,
exactly.
I find it really annoying that no one bothers to look into the fact that not everyone is going to respond to medication in the same way, not every same doses.
Right. Yep.
But we also, why are we not doing this more with illegal drugs? Because like we said, people still take them, and so at this point, not checking their safety in different groups of people just kind of seems like intentional ignorance.
Yep.
It's almost like trying to make it dangerous by withholding that information.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like that relates back to the topic just a little bit ago of like, well, you can take these drugs that we prescribe, but not these ones. And I feel like that speaks to the control game. Like how we as how do I say it? I relate this. You, you know me, David. I like to look interdisciplinary. So,
Yeah.
like this reminds me of how we see gender and how we see other social constructs where they exist so that people are separated and put into groups and therefore are more controllable. And I do believe that even if medication is served to us usually with the best interest like our best interests like centered, but I think it is still to have some kind of control over us. Like you can have these drugs, these are the good drugs, we are the good people prescribing the good drugs, but you are bad for having any other relationship with any other kind of drug that is not prescribed, or even the ones that we do prescribe sometimes. Because I actually just had issues with my doctor over ADHD medication because it's a controlled substance, right? Like there's still judgment placed off, and there's still um you know gross manipulation and gross labeling going on. Like I had an episode after coming off of Cymbalta incorrectly because it freaked me the fuck out, the reaction that I was having on it, and I cut it out cold turkey because I didn't, the circumstances were what they were, and that's not what you do with Cymbalta. um and I was hospitalized twice, and the first time that it happened, my mom was with me, and she I have opinions. She should not have said, but she did tell the doctors that I had the week prior taken some psychedelic things. And instead of focusing on the treatment of what I was going through with Cymbalta, they labeled me as a drug abuser in my chart, which further prevented me care that I needed later on, like a couple years later, as I was seeking a diagnosis for my EDS. And like it prolonged the process by about a year or half a year, and caused me great distress and illness, because it was a whole episode of things being gaslit by this one doctor here in Rochester. All because I had done drugs that were not medically prescribed, which I'm lucky that I did do them, because if I hadn't, my central nervous system would have failed me during that camping event instead of after, and I would have had to been hospitalized during the event, and who knows what could have happened. Like, I basically saved myself doing psychedelics, you know? So it's just, I really do feel like it comes down to, well, what we say goes, like this really authoritarian perspective that a lot of medical professionals have, making them like the harbiters of truth and goodness and care. And really, a lot of the time it's just to place judgment and pass the buck on our own care. Like it frustrates me. It frustrates me so much. Like, we don't need that stigma. We don't need that judgment. We just need acceptance, compassion, and care. Like,
Yeah. I have my own anecdotes around this, because, you know, I have a history of like, so God forbid I even imply that I want something vaguely mind altering prescribed to me. They lose their
right.
damn minds. Like, I remember once I was like, I can't sleep, can I have some sleeping tablets? So like, you're drug seeking. I was like, I've been sober for like 6 years. Like I was like, I've used these sleeping tablets safely the whole way through that. And you, this new doctor I have never met before, who knows nothing about me, is calling me
Right.
a drug seeker.
It's always with people who don't even know you, who don't take the time to get to know you, who see certain things mentioned in your chart, make judgments before even speaking with you, and then write you off. Like,
Yeah.
how is that medical care?
The
It's
thing
not.
the thing I never understood is that I specifically asked for it to be put in my notes, my history of addiction, because I didn't want a doctor to irresponsibly prescribe me
Right.
something that could have really kicked things back off. But what actually happened was, yeah, that kind of worked for a while, but it was just used to deny me care on lots of different levels. And it meant that what I actually came with was this huge cloud of stigma that floated over me every time I walked into a doctor's office.
Right.
The irony is that nowadays they don't bother reading my notes, and I've been offered all kinds of opiates, benzodiazepines, neuroleptics, like that's basically everything I said never prescribe this to me. They keep trying to prescribe to me for problems I've got. And I'm like, have you read my notes? Well, no, we don't have time to read everyone's notes. I'm like, it's practically printed on the front. Like, I've been considering getting like a tattoo, like just
Oh my God. What is the point of having a medical record if people aren't going to actually take the time to witness you and your journey and work with you on it, instead of start from scratch every single time? I've encountered that too. It's either I've been labeled a certain way because they have read only very specific parts of my chart, or they haven't read anything and I have to fight for myself every step of the way. It's just, can we establish some kind of like standard of adequate, compassionate care?
yeah,
I would really love that by this point. It is
yeah,
2023. Like, come on.
yeah. So we've
Um,
we've had a really interesting question from Chris.
I was just
Chris
about to,
says,
yeah.
what do you think of the potential impact slash role of artificial intelligence in this space? For example, AI assessing, prescribing, and guiding instead of NT biased so-called professional humans. Now, on the surface, sounds interesting. However, I immediately think about the story I read about the police service in America that was using AI to police neighborhoods, that was programmed by white people
Right.
and
Was
subsequently was an incredibly racist computer
Yes.
program.
Yes.
So I think you have the same issue.
Yes.
You can design artificial intelligence to do all this, but it's only as intelligent as
As the people making it.
the people designing, you know. So if it's designed by biased people who are working from biased information, the AI is biased. So it's
Yes.
something with a lot of good potential, I think, but it needs to be done very carefully. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Jaesic?
I was just about to say pretty much the same thing. AI is still a human made product. Like, it is still the result of first the coding from human brains, but then also the information that it takes up to do what it does, right? Like, it sources from the internet. And if the internet is rife with all the isms and the phobias and specific neurotypical perspective, more so than it is that the counterpart of it, like autistic, or people who have lived experiences in being oppressed, we're going to have a service that is just reproducing what we've always had. I see also that Chris mentioned studies are showing that AI doctors are shown to be more empathetic than human docs. Maybe it's moving in that direction, and I think that's really exciting and useful. But I think it's going to require a lot of hands-on monitoring by compassionate individuals who are seeking equity and not reproduction of what already is. So it really comes down to who's researching, who's programming, who's monitoring, to see if that will be a useful tool in the future. But I have hopes for that. I think that'd be amazing.
I think one of the things that stands out to me with AI in the field of any kind of substance use is that a lot of AI at the moment is designed by people with good intentions doing research.
Yeah.
One day it will be done almost solely by corporations with a financial interest.
Right.
And I think that's where the waters start to muddy, is when the AI becomes about protecting someone's financial interests rather than serving the people it's designed for. That's where we start to have a problem. And like you said, that is full of misinformation. So if you want an AI doctor, for example, to work with people who perhaps have history of substance use or need a medication prescribed, it's got to be a collaborative project. You can't have a small group of people designing a computer program that is going to potentially work with millions of people,
Right.
because things will come up that small group of people won't have accounted for. And I think, there probably needs to be more regulation around AI before it's going to be something that can really be rolled out to the wider world, as an
Yeah.
option. But yeah, no, that was a good question. I liked that,
Yeah, it's really
Tanya.
interesting thought
But
experience.
we're getting close to running out of time. Was there anything else you wanted to add that we've not talked about?
Honestly, I think we covered a lot of awesome stuff. I do want to say, and thank you, Chris. I do want to say that, if you are watching this, right, and you are, whether you're autistic or not, but especially if you are autistic, like, exploring your relationship with drugs or substances in general, um, I wish I had more guidance on this journey, and I wish I had had more compassion and grace for myself. So if you're on this journey and you're struggling, or if you are scared, or you're feeling judged, or XYZ kind of thing, like, one, you deserve care, you deserve compassion, you deserve grace on this journey, you deserve your own body's truth. So please, like, listen to what your body is telling you when you experiment with these things. Um, there's no reason your journey with these things have to look like anybody else's. And if you really feel like you need support, don't hesitate to go seek that out. There should be no judgment or shame in seeking help when you need it. So I just want to like give that disclaimer out before we end here, because I know when I was doing these things, that would have been helpful for me.
Yeah. And the bit of information I would add is that, especially considering we've been talking about moral judgments and things,
Yeah.
people's value is not defined by their relationship with chemicals. You are not any less valuable for being a person who uses recreational drugs, prescription drugs.
Yes.
Just because you take drugs, drink alcohol, whatever your relationship with them, you are still just as valid a human, as valid in needs and strengths and struggles as any other person. And anyone who tries to tell you that substance use is less valuable or less worthy of something, they have an agenda. Don't trust that.
No,
Um,
don't.
but I think there's definitely a part 2 in here somewhere, because I'd be really interested to talk to you about substance use and neuroqueering.
Oh yeah.
And I know we did that live a few months ago, didn't we? Where we really got into it. And I think there's definitely a part 2 here about that. So I'm gonna have to hit you up and try and get that sorted out.
That'd be great.
But yeah, it's been a really good episode, Jaesic. Thank you so much for joining me for this. I knew this was going to be a good one. It's always a good one when I do lives and podcasts with you.
Aw, thanks, David.
So yeah, this has been David's Divergent Discussions. I'm here with Jaesic, and we've been talking about neurodivergence and substance use.
Yeah.
Next week we have another episode. I think it might be something to do with the new mental health bill going through the UK government, but I'm not showing up. I hope that's next week. I'm chronically disorganized. And tomorrow I will be live, both from this Facebook page that I'm currently on YouTube, Twitter, and also from the Aim for the Rainbow Facebook page, doing a live with them. So make sure you tune into that. That's also at 7 p.m. tomorrow, British time. So yeah, check it all out. It's been really good. Going to sit here and wave awkwardly now until we end the stream. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, David, for having me. I hope to see you at Queer Cult as well, folks, if you're interested in staying tuned with what I'm doing. So, all right. Bye, everybody.